Hello and welcome to Unit 4 in our Latin American history class. In this unit, we'll be looking at the theme of nationalism. And so we'll follow Chastain's themes once again in this unit, as far as he's outlined them in the book. What we need to think about when we think about nationalism, however, is the various different ways in which it manifested itself. In the written introduction to this unit, I referred to this trend as nationalisms in the plural, meaning that whatever this nationalism is that we're talking about, it didn't always mean the same thing, it didn't look the same way in all of Latin America's countries during the early, probably the first half of the 20th century is generally the time frame that we're looking at here. So one of the big questions then to keep in mind is whether or not nationalism led to revolution in a certain country, or if it led to political reform, and how those reforms were enacted, whether or not they were successful. So the kind of prime examples here are the Mexican Revolution, in terms of a nation that followed that path toward revolution. And so in this regard, we need to think about the Porfiriato that we studied in the last unit, the implications of scientific racism and neocolonialism for Mexico, what kind of state of affairs its people were in by the first couple of decades of the 20th century, and why, why those conditions fomented revolution in that nation. Also consider who are the major players. We're just going to get kind of a cursory look at the Mexican Revolution. It's something that I've studied quite a bit, and it's a topic that has a very extensive historiography, and that's something that Alan Knight will point out in the article that we'll read by him for this unit. I just wanted to show you a couple of books here. This one is Alan Knight's first volume of the Mexican Revolution. You can see it's a rather thick book. There are two of these. And then I also wanted to show you Friedrich Katz, his work on Pancho Villa, which is a 1,000-page tome. So my point here in showing you these books off my bookshelf is that it's really hard to study the Mexican Revolution in a nutshell because it was so complex. So many different actors, so many different things going on, especially considering which region of Mexico you were in. So the Mexican Revolution, for example, looked very different in Chihuahua than it did in Oaxaca. And there were implications for the 20th century in all of that. If you are interested in the revolution and studying it more for your final project or otherwise, please let me know. I have shorter books that I could recommend and other kinds of articles as well. So one of the things that I think Chastain does particularly well in the chapter that we'll be reading on nationalism is he brings in a lot of the cultural implications of nationalism connected to the Mexican Revolution. So he looks at the indigenismo movement in Mexico, centered on, I should say, the SEP, or the Public Education Secretariat, as well as the work of artists like Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo, who through their art portrayed the nation as one of indigenous and mestizo background. So one of the major shifts then, one of the reasons I think that Chastain refers to nationalism as a major watershed, is that those older notions of scientific racism that so many Latin American elites bought into were thrown by the wayside during the nationalist period. People across Latin America, whether elites or not, began to embrace the notion that their nations were unique because they had been built on the foundations of indigenous societies. Now that's not to say, unfortunately, that these leaders recognized the present value at their time, or the contemporary value of native societies and native peoples. Indigenous peoples throughout Latin America, as in the United States, have continued to struggle for their rights and their place in the nation. However, in terms of their symbolic worth, that changed very much during the nationalist period. Also, as we move through this chapter then and these readings and videos, also think about the level to which reform was possible in certain areas of South America especially. So in places like Uruguay and Argentina, reform movements took hold in the early part of the 20th century that actually brought a lot of social leveling and social change. But you need to think about and ask the question of why was that the case there? So why not revolution in those countries? And what were the pillars supporting that reform? And what happened when those pillars were removed to those reform movements? Finally, as we get toward the wood readings, toward the end of Chastain, we're going to look at the turn toward populism. So the kind of archetypical populist leaders in Latin America were Juan Perón in Argentina, Getulio Vargas in Brazil, figures like Lázaro Cárdenas in Mexico, and Jorge Eliezer Gaitan in Colombia that I mentioned in the objectives for this unit. So think about what populism meant in each of the cases of those particular leaders. Also think about whether or not the earlier reform movements, such as Batismo in Uruguay, were a form of populism as well. This notion of populism is something that's going to bridge into the next unit and also into the unit about revolution, but then also about reactions to that revolution by the late part of the 20th century. So the point here is just keep all of those themes in mind as we continue to move through the course. The last thing I wanted to say in this intro is about Alan Knight's article that we'll be reading about Cardenismo. Unfortunately, as we'll talk about when we read Grandin's book, and I talk to you about writing your review of the book, Knight doesn't put his thesis statement right at the beginning of the essay. He spends a few pages talking about the historiography of the revolution. So what he's talking about there are all the various ideas that appear in these very long books that I just showed you about how to interpret the revolution, the Mexican Revolution, I should say, and what it meant for the people in Mexico by the mid-20th century. One of the big questions then is whether or not the presidency of Lázaro Cárdenas was actually a major turning point in terms of things like social equality, economic justice, actually achieving some of those goals of the revolution. Some people have declared that yes, Cárdenas's presidency was very radical, and it brought home all of those revolutionary goals, especially in his 1938 nationalization of oil. That's, again, the big example that's used. So Knight is trying to look at the situation from a little bit more of a nuanced perspective. He does see the radicalism of Cárdenas's proposals, but he also points out that the existing situation throughout Mexico in terms of party structures and local and regional governments meant that Cardenismo wasn't quite as powerful as it's often portrayed to be in terms of effecting real change in Mexico in the mid-20th century. So again, keep that in mind as you read. Please note that his thesis statement's on page 79, so if you want to kind of cut to the chase and see whether or not he thinks Cardenismo is a juggernaut or a jalopy, that's where you'll need to go. So I hope that you enjoy this unit. There's a couple of great videos included here as well, and as always, please let me know if you have any questions.